He karakia tīmata. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou, ki hei mauriora.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this webinar for the Kaipara District Plan Exposure Draft. Enjoy the webinar and enjoy getting involved with this great opportunity which Kaipara District Council has never had before. to be involved in an exposure draft for the district plan. This is the last ever Kaipara district plan. So make the most of it. Get stuck in, Kaipara. Kia pai tō rā.
Kia ora and welcome to our fifth webinar, which is general wide matters. So for all those joining us tonight, this is about the exposure draft, Kaipara District Plan. And with me tonight is our team of the district plan team. So I'm just going to quickly introduce everybody. So first up is Michael Day. If you could just say a quick hi, Michael.
Good evening. I'm Michael Day, the Strategy, Policy and Governance Manager here at Kaipara District Council. I hope you enjoy the webinar and please get involved and give us some feedback on our exposure draft by the 16th of September. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Michael. Paul Vanders, are you there, Paul?
Good evening, Paul Vanders, District Planner, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Ty Affio, or Ty, are you there?
Kia ora everybody, I'm Ty, the graduate planner in the team, and I hope you look forward to finding out more about general district-wide matters.
Thanks, Ty. We're very excited, aren't we? And last but not least, Megan Walters. Do you want to say hi, Megan? Thanks, Megan. All right, so let's crack on. So what are we covering tonight? So tonight we're going to be looking at the earthwork rules and some provisions for noise, genetically modified organisms, which is something new for the Kaipara District Plan. We're going to talk about lighting and glare, signs, and temporary activities, which is also new for the Kaipara District Plan. So just a quick note there to make sure you get any feedback on the exposure draft into us here at Council by Friday the 16th of September. So as we're going through the webinar tonight, feel free to put any questions that you may have in the chat box and we will respond at the end of the webinar. And if you do want to talk to us directly about an issue that might come up through the webinar, or if you've got something else you want to talk about, we've got a chat to the planner service and very happy to receive emails, etc. So I'll talk about that a bit more at the end of the webinar. But first and foremost, I'm just going to step you through the earthworks provisions that we've included in our exposure draft. Now remember, these are draft provisions, so we're seeking feedback on the exposure draft in preparation for our proposed district plan, which we intend to release in 2023, probably about mid-2023. So we've still got a few more months of work to do, but check out these rules if you're interested. So on the earthworks front, many of you will know that earthworks are required for development of land. So this generally happens through subdivision or land use when people are building things or developing sites. And they're obviously an integral part of our rural environment for farming, horticultural and agricultural activities. The Regional Council also have provisions for earthworks, but District Council generally manages amenity values as well as geotechnical aspects and risks from natural hazards. So often we're looking at kind of the more localised effect, whereas the Regional Council are looking at erosion and sediment control and the bigger scale earthworks generally. So of course many of you will know that earthwork activities can have a significant effect on amenity, landscape and cultural values across the Kaipara district if it's not managed carefully. So our job is to make sure that we're putting rules in the plan that are well balanced and hopefully achieve those things. So what we've put into the proposed exposure draft are some high level objectives that kind of frame what are the things that we're trying to seek in terms of outcomes for the next plan, and then we've got some policy direction as well. So probably the first couple of objectives there are really about providing for earthworks in the Kaipara district while managing the adverse effects. As I said, we need to look at those. We're all about avoiding large-scale earthworks in sensitive environments. So we've got a reference there to outstanding natural landscapes and outstanding natural features, or ONLs, ONFs, as well as heritage sites. And this is because these are areas that we really value in the district, and we don't want to see massive scars on the landscape from large-scale earthworks. So there are some provisions in the plan around that. We also don't want activities to compromise the stability of the land, and that's usually from a geotechnical perspective, as well as infrastructure and public safety. So we want to make sure that we're not compromising any pipes under the ground or people's safety. And I guess the other thing that falls in earthworks as well is our mineral resources. So we do manage quarrying and mining activities through the district plan. So this final objective here is about efficiently and effectively managing the district's mineral resources, recognising the social and economic benefits of such resources while managing adverse effects. And if we come down to the policies, we want to recognise and provide for earthwork activities, enable rural land uses. So this is things like your farm tracks, drains, quarries, any ancillary rural earthworks. We want to enable minor land disturbance activities for small scale activities. So this includes things like gardening or cultivation activities. So we would want to make sure that people can still do those things without triggering a resource consent every time. We also want to manage and control effects in sensitive environments. As I said before, this links to our outstanding natural features and outstanding natural landscapes, as well as our coastal environment chapters. And we do have a webinar tomorrow night talking specifically about natural environment values, and that will include those areas if you want to listen in on that tomorrow night. We also want to protect heritage sites and sites of significance to Māori. So there's a link here to the heritage chapter. We also want to protect nationally and regionally significant infrastructure. So that's all of our transpower lines, gas pipelines, and anything that's been deemed to be nationally or regionally significant. So it's important the district plan protects those things. And so then if we jump to the rules, we are proposing a range of thresholds across the multiple zones that we're including in the new exposure draft. And if you're wanting to know more about the zonings that we're proposing, check out our previous webinar, which was on subdivision and zoning. But tonight, the focus here is really just stepping you through these volumes and areas. So as you can see on this slide, we've got a range of volumes and areas, and I'll just point out the bigger ones. So there are some key changes for the industrial zones and the general rural and rural production zones, which includes farm quarries as well. So we're trying to get alignment here with the regional plan and the regional council documents there around how much earth you can move and make sure that those are fairly consistent. So if you've got any feedback on that, we'd really value that. The other thing that people often forget about is clean fill material, and there are some specific definitions included in the national planning standards, which we've had to adopt. So we've had a good think with our new zone provisions about areas where we want to allow more clean fill to be imported to site. So we've got 500 cube for the general rural zones and rural production zone, as well as heavy industrial. But everywhere else we're proposing 250 cubic meters. And then we've got importation of fill that is not clean fill material to a site. So it's doesn't meet that definition. And that's 250 cubic meters in the general rural production zone and heavy industrial zone, and 0 in other zones, because that's usually one that we do want to have a bit of control around. And certainly in the sensitive environments, as I said before, these are areas where we want to make sure that it's not leaving a big scar on the landscape. So we are proposing the various volumes and area thresholds that you can see in the chart there, and some of them are quite restrictive, so they are limited to very small cubic volumes, and we'd really like to hear what you think about those. But again, the purpose of keeping those fairly constrained is because of the potential effects that could have from an amenity and landscape perspective if we allow too much. So we definitely want to hear from you if you've got any views on that, or if your property falls perhaps within a coastal environment or one of the ONFs or ONL sites, or a flood hazard risk area. I think the other thing to point out too with this chapter is that farm quarries are provided for in the general rural and rural production zones, and that will enable a volume threshold to be utilised within the site. But we also do provide for mining and quarrying activities within the chapter as well. And yeah, would be keen to hear from any mining or quarrying operators if they have anything to say about what we've included in the district plan for their sites as well. So that concludes all that I had to say about earthworks. And so I'm just going to talk about noise now. So noise is obviously another district-wide matter that needs to be quite carefully managed. So many of you know that noise can impact on the amenity of the local environment and health and well-being of people. So generally, we've got some sections in the Resource Management Act there. So section 16 and 17, they do enable council to manage and control noise under the legislation. But the district plan is generally the place where people come to find the volumes that they can achieve through the noise provisions, or the thresholds, I should say, not volumes. So we are proposing simple and enabling noise provisions that are up to date and provide for a wide range of activities and their associated effects. The key focus of the exposure draft and ultimately the proposed district plan provisions are to manage reverse sensitivity effects on noise sensitive activities environments. So this might be, industrial activities on residential zones next door. So we need to make sure that we're allowing people the comfort of sleep and not allowing those activities next door to get too loud. So it is important that we also protect noise generating activities. So this is the reverse of what I've just said. From new sensitive activities encroaching, particularly in the rural zone. So for example, a dairy farming operation, if we put residential housing too close to that, then that's obviously going to have an effect on the people living there. So we want to make sure that we're protecting those activities that can only happen in the rural zones. The national direction in the MPS, or I should say national policy statements, planning standards provides a large amount of certainty about using the New Zealand standards for noise. So it takes away the issue for councils which standard to apply and where. There are a couple of sites in our district which are heavy industrial activities. So examples there being the Fonterra Dairy Factory in Mangatoroto and the Silverfern Farms operation here in Dargaville. So the district plan needs to provide for those activities to make sure that they can continue to operate without any issues. So what have we included in the district plan? So we're looking at including more specific provisions for permitted activities. Our focus is on exemptions from noise S1, which is standard, which is the key set of standards for each of the zones. So there's a table which I'm getting to shortly. We have provided for noise from temporary events. We've also looked at temporary military training activities, construction noise, which also considers the effects of vibration. We've got helicopter landing areas. This is because it could become an issue for Kaipara, particularly in areas like Mangawhai, where there seems to be an increase of people utilising helicopter landing areas. Bird scaring devices is always an important one for our rural zones, particularly if there are horticultural cropping operations underway, as well as frost fans and horticultural wind machines. And then we've got the noise sensitive activities in the light and heavy industrial zones and in the commercial zones as well. So we have got some requirements around residential buildings within the commercial zone, which will require some acoustic insulation. And then finally, we've got some restrictions on blasting, shooting and gunfire and wind turbines, which are new to the district plan. And these give a lot more certainty for those types of activities from a noise perspective as well. So just a quick overview of the zones. The provisions here in this table and the volume thresholds here are not too dissimilar to the current operative district plan. So there've been a few tweaks where we've needed to align the standards a little bit more with current practice and what other district plans around the country are doing. So where I've put proposed district plan, that's the exposure draft. So these are proposed noise provisions, and so you can check them out. And of course, they're all in the noise S1, as I mentioned before. So if you've got a particular activity you're looking at checking out what you can do within those zones, have a little look in the chapter there. And as I said before, there are some exemptions for the Mangatoroto Dairy Factory site, which is a heavy industrial site. So that concludes our short discussion around noise, but certainly if you've got feedback, we'd love to hear from you around those. Okay, so I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Paul, who's going to talk to you a little about light.
Thank you, Catherine. From the ears, we go to the eyes. And so we talk a little bit about light. And the question, obviously, why do we want to have a say regarding to light? Because the potential effect of lighting or lights and the glare, especially glare, must be considered with all subdivisions and land use development. Artificial outdoor lighting has the potential to generate an impact on the immunity, the ecology, and the health and safety of people in their particular communities. And then the issue of particular significance is specifically in the residential environments important, and where especially next to recreation areas, parks, sports fields and those type of things, as well as industrial lighting near residential areas. Now, lighting is necessary in some locations, such as the industries, and we see that clearly in Dagawal with the meat factory that actually works 24/7. And on land and transport, traffic lights as well as street lightings for security and safety reasons. So those are the reasons why we would like to have the district plan to control light aspects. Next slide, please. Right, now coming back to the district plan itself, the how portion of the district plan, we have basic objectives, and the objectives deal with design and locating of artificial outdoor lighting with the aim to minimize the adverse effect on the compatible, and that they have to be compatible and to the characteristics and qualities of the surrounding environment. Again, then protect the amenity values of sensitive activities, such as residential areas, from the adverse effects of artificial light and glare. And again, I put the emphasis also on glare, and that you get particularly next to sports fields and stadiums. But to enable the use of artificial light for industrial activities and within the transport network. So those are the objectives. Then if we look at the policies, what we said is we have to provide for artificial lighting in the district plan by assessing the activities in accordance with particular policies that are written into the exposure draft. Why and how do we do it? We manage the intensity as well as the location and the direction, upwards or downwards or sidewards, of any artificial outdoor lighting by assessing the effects that that light might have on especially then the sensitive environments. Now, after the policies, you obviously have to have rules that actually tell you how you do it and what are the parameters that you use. The permitted activities for all the zones will be found in the Australia-New Zealand standards, which I've quoted, for the control of the obstructive effects of outdoor lighting, and the International Commission for Elimination for External Elimination. And it provides for the maximum level of light spill, it's part of the glare aspects of a maximum of 10 lux, both vertically and horizontally between 10 o'clock in the evenings and 7 o'clock in the mornings, so that you don't have lights that actually shine in your bedroom. Restricted discretionary activity, if it's not a permitted activity, is a restricted discretionary activity where the light rule 1 cannot be complied with. Next slide, please.
Well, I think that concludes all
Okay.
we had on light, if you are happy with that. And we're
Yep.
moving on to signage. So we'll hear again from you shortly on the GMO topic, if that's all right.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm now going to hand over to Taiafio to talk about signs, which is always an exciting topic in our district. So over to you, Tai.
Oh yeah, signs. So signs are important for businesses and activities across the Kaipara, serving as important communication tools. The use of signs allow us to advertise goods and services. They promote upcoming events and alert people to hazards, as well as direct and control traffic and pedestrians. Very important, the use of signs. Currently, signs are being managed by both bylaws and the district plan, and we will talk more about regulatory mechanisms shortly. So the new district plan needs to ensure signs don't cause any potential adverse effects such as amenity and character values of a relevant zone, as well as traffic safety features. Next slide, please, Catherine. So moving on to the regulatory mechanisms which control the use of signage. So there are 3 regulatory mechanisms that control the use of signage across the Kaipara district. These are the district plan. The district plan regulates signs on private property, focusing on protecting public safety and amenity. The second one is the Kaipara District Council Consolidated Bylaw, which regulates signs on council-controlled land, property, and public spaces. And the third regulatory mechanism is Wakakotahi Signs on State Highway Bylaw 2010, which, as the name suggests, manages signs along state highways. Now, the draft signs chapter notes the different regulatory mechanisms, so this alerts sign users of where they will need to go for a resource consent. And in short, signs without written consent or approval from the appropriate authority are just not permitted and will be non-compliant. So, if you have any opinions on how signs should be managed in the district, be sure to get in touch and let us know. But we're going to talk more about the rules in the draft district plan on signs. Next slide, please. So, the main objective for signs in the new draft district chapter is to contribute to the social, cultural, and economic well-being of the community and support public safety and maintain or enhance the amenity and character of the respective zoning. The policies there are to enable official signs, information signs, temporary signs, real estate and land development signs, manage the effects of signs across the Kaipara district, avoid cumulative effects, and manage the potential cumulative design and location in respect to the land transport network. The rules, the permitted activities for official signs, temporary signs, or real estate signs, so those signs are permitted. It's a permitted activity for all other signs and zones which meet the standards of the zones that they're in. It's a permitted activity for signs in sensitive environments such as coastal environments, natural character, ONF or ONL, and it's a permitted activity for signs on or attached to heritage buildings or items. So an overall of the rules in the sign chapter. So in all zones, such as the ones listed there in the first column, the rule is found in the second column. So all zones up to 2 times temporary or community signs, 2 by 2 meters area each, and real estate and development signs are 1 by 2 meters, 1 meter by 2 meters. And commercial town centre, mixed use, light industrial and heavy industrial zones, up to 3 signs, 6 by 2 meters each, must not exceed the height of the building. And in residential zones, rural lifestyle, rural settlement, natural open space, and sport and active recreation zones, up to 2 signs with 1 by 2 meters squared, 1 meter squared area, each 4 meters height, and general rural production zones, up to 2 signs with 3 meters squared area, 4 meters height. The exceptions being the coastal environment, outstanding and high natural character areas, ONF, ONL, or heritage items or buildings where signs must not exceed 1 metre squared.
Beautiful. Thanks very much for that, Ty. So if anyone's thinking of putting signs up for their home business or their commercial businesses, this is the chapter that you want to check out. And we certainly want to know from anyone that perhaps is in the business of making signs, or certainly has to look at these rules on a regular basis. So thanks, Ty. And now I'm going to hand back to Paul to step us through our new exciting topic that's going into the Kaipara District exposure draft. So back to you, Paul, with GMOs.
Thank you, Catherine. Interesting enough is that the operative district plan, 2013 plan, has a holding paragraph regarding to genetically modified organisms, but has not got any provisions in the plan. So the intention is, now that we have moved on, we are going to introduce the genetic modified organisms provisions in the district plan. Now, firstly, is what is a GMO, or genetic modified organism? Is an animal, plant, or microorganism whose DNA has been genetically altered in a way that does not occur naturally using engineering techniques. And those include crisping as well as gene editing. The GMO may significantly affect people or our environment and the economy, and we are specifically thinking on the horticulture and the agricultural areas, as well as forestry. The effects of GMO could be significant and irreversible if they are not controlled, and that's the main reason why the council wants to have certain provisions for this particular purpose. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is responsible for approving field trials in New Zealand under the Hazardous Substance and New Organisms Act 1996. However, the question is, why do councils make the choice to also have a say in this particular area? These matters were debated in the High Court appeal, Federated Farmers versus Northland Regional Council, and the questioned whether councils, both regional and district councils, had jurisdiction to manage GMO, and it concluded that councils do have the jurisdiction and can include these provisions in their regional and their district plans. The main reason why we chose to make those provisions. Next slide, please. Right. Kaipara is at this point in time the only local authority north of the Waikato that does not have regulations in terms of GMO. In August 2018, the Kaipara Council recommended to amend the district plan to include the necessary provisions related to the management of GMOs similar to those in Auckland Council, Far North Council and Whangarei Council, and also to mention that in Northland, in terms of the regional plan, the CMA, or the Coastal Marine Area, which is under control of the Regional Council, also is covered. So Kaipara is the only local authority north of the Waikato that does not have any provisions. Directions from Council included the regional policy statement from the Regional Council. In the regional policy statement is to adopt a precautionary approach, and that's the approach that we have been taking in our preparation for the particular rules and policies. Kaipara District Council are proposing new provisions for the GMO in the exposure draft, which have been previously tested by other councils. In a survey in 2009, it's quite a long time ago, 74% of the Kaipara responses supported that council should be involved. Of that 74%, 49% wanted rules, and 34% said, no, it's not necessary to have rules, but 68% of the people who who responded positively wanted that there should be harm protection included into the district plan. Next slide, please. Now, how do we control those particular GMOs? Firstly, the objective is to protect from the potential adverse effect associated with the outdoor use, storage, cultivation, harvesting, processing, or transportation of GMOs, with the emphasis on the outdoor use. And the policies is adopt a precautionary approach, as I mentioned from the regional policy statement, by prohibiting the general release of GMO and using a discretionary activity status for outdoor field trials. It's not outdoor release, but outdoor field trials of GMO and the use of viable GM veterinary vaccines. That would be a permitted activity. Provide for the use of the Environmental Protection Agency approved non-viable or viable GM medical applications, including the genetically modified vaccines, as a permitted activity. To ensure and consent holders for outdoor field trials of GMOs are financially accountable. If something goes wrong, they have to be accountable. Ensure the consent holder for outdoor field trialing effort avoids, as far as can be reasonably achieved, the risk to the environment, and ensure resource consent granted for outdoor field trialing are subject to monitoring costs. And then all the others are ensured, then we can require consent holders to be liable for any adverse effects beyond their site. Then we adopt an adaptive approach. In other words, it is not always prohibited. It's not always no. We adopt an adaptive approach to the management of the outdoor use, storage, cultivation, harvesting, processing, and transportation of GMO by reviewing the plan provisions. If evidence is there that we could go a step further, then we can do certain changes. And then lastly, consideration of the assessment of the criteria, which I mentioned in the district plan as part of the resource consent. Next one. Right, in summary, the GMO rules permitted activities for indoor use and research involving GMO, and that includes medical releases. Discretionary activity is for field trials of GMO and viable genetic modification of veterinary vaccines, but prohibited activities for the release of GMO. The standards for information to be provided and bond requirements and monitoring and plan costs are all included in the requirements for in the proposed or the draft plan. And we would like to get inputs and comments on this particular matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was really enlightening, and I hope that we do get some feedback on this very new part of our exposure draft. So now back to you, Ty. We're just going to talk about temporary activities.
Thanks, Catherine. So, temporary activities. Temporary activities contribute to the economic, social, and cultural well-being of people and communities across the districts. These activities include cultural events, concerts, markets, sports events, arts, and craft displays. So, for the Kaipara district, that's our field days, Northern Base, and other big gathering events like that. The district plan also includes the New Zealand Defence Force temporary military training activities and general construction works, and some bylaws may apply to some activities. Temporary activities can generate, so why do we control temporary activities in the draft district plan? Because temporary activities can generate adverse effects such as noise, traffic, and other adverse effects, and these need to be appropriately managed. So here's the objectives and policies in our draft district plan, and the objective there is to enable temporary activities, so allow them to happen, and manage and minimize the adverse effects on the amenity and character and traffic safety. The policies promote temporary activities that positively contribute to the social, cultural, and economic well-being of people and communities across Kaipara. They manage the adverse effects associated with temporary activities and provide for temporary motorsport events in the general rural production, and industrial zones. The policies for the site for temporary activities also provide for temporary military training, temporary emergency training and activities, and temporary network utilities. So what are the rules for the temporary activities draft chapter? The permitted activities are where the activity occurs no more than 3 times within a consecutive 12-month period, has a duration less than 72 hours, operates between 7:30 and 9 p.m. Monday to Sunday night. Temporary structures are not erected more than 2 days before the event and removed no more than 3 days after. The site is returned to original condition within 3 days, and there's no direct site access from a state highway or regional arterial road. Temporary military training activities for no more than 31 days within 12-month period, buildings or structures are removed within 7 days of completion and must comply with relevant noise standards for the zones. Temporary buildings and structures ancillary to construction work located on the same site as the construction work no more than 15 metres squared where adjoining a residential zone, removal upon completion or within 12 months, whichever is sooner, and must comply with height, recession plane, setback, and noise rules for the zone. So the restricted discretionary activities for temporary motorsport events provided 2 events per calendar year operate between 7:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. and structures are erected 2 days prior and removed within 2 days of the event. Earthworks require rehabilitation to original condition, and noise standards for the zone need to be met. It's a discretionary activity if these cannot be complied with. All other activities, either restricted, discretionary, or discretionary activities.
Awesome, thanks, Ty.
And that concludes our talk on temporary activities.
Yeah,
It was
that's
very temporary. It's a temporary activity.
and I think because this is such a new part of our district plan, we would love to hear from you if you do operate community events or activities that might fall into this, because it could be that resource consent is required and maybe we need to think about whether it should be enabled. So please do let us know. And that concludes the detailed part of tonight's webinar. So I'm just going to remind everybody that we are up to our 5th webinar now. So anyone that's missed any of our webinars, they are all available through Council's YouTube channel. Tomorrow night we've got our final, second to last one on the natural environment's value, followed by the Tangata Whenua Mana Whenua webinar on Friday, which is going to actually be in the morning, not at 7 o'clock. We also still have our Chat to the Planner sessions, so get on our website, District Plan Review webpage, and select a Chat to the Planner sessions. We're here to talk to you if you've got any questions or just want to discuss your property in order to give some feedback. And if you do need help with feedback, we have an independent planner who is available to help people prepare their feedback. So please do book a session with our independent planner there if you want to. And then just last but not least slide before we move into questions, just so you're aware, the journey ahead is we're still in the very initial stages of developing our district plan. So over the next couple of years, we've still got to go through the process where we prepare the proposed district plan, which is what we're aiming for next year. And it'll be some time until this plan is actually operative and ready to function. But I think this is an exciting journey, and this is the initial stages, and it's really important that we hear from you now so that you can influence that proposed district plan, where you'll get a second opportunity to put in formal submissions next year as well. But do get on board, and if you've got any questions about that process, please let us know. So now we're going to go to the questions. Has there been any questions, Megan, through the chat? No, no, okay. So we've got some questions that we prepared a little earlier, and I'm going to fire these around between Paul and Ty, and if Michael wants to jump in as well. So I'm going to start with a quick question on signs. So Ty, this one comes back to the question around signs on the roadside. So you talked about what people need to do in terms of getting an approval for that. So do you want to just briefly describe the process for consenting if you're putting a sign on the state highway, for example?
So signs on the state highway are controlled by the Signs on the State Highway bylaw from New Zealand Transport Agency. That's what it's known as legally. We now know it as waka kotahi. However, if you're going to put a sign on the state highway, you're going to need consent or try and acquire consent from New Zealand Transport Agency waka kotahi. And that's the short answer, Catherine.
Beautiful, that is great. So yeah, good advice there. Paul, I've just got a quick question here about GMOs. So would a landowner be able to plant a GMO next to me, as in like the field next to me, I'm assuming? But do you have a quick response to that in terms of your discussion earlier on GMOs?
Yeah. I've got a short answer for that one, but I've got another question as well, which relates to this first question. If it is a GMO and it is not approved, then it would be a prohibited activity. You would not be able to have a field trial or a production on that particular property as such. However, and that's the second question that came from the organized agricultural area, and that is, yeah, what really are we going to do with the provisions of an adaptive approach? Now, I would like to read from Policy 7 is to adopt an adaptive approach to the management of outdoor use, storage, cultivation, harvesting, processing of or transportation of GMO in the district through a periodic review of these plan provisions, and then particularly if new information on the benefits and or adverse effects of GMO activities become available. So it's prohibited until that time as that evidence has come in and it is identified that it is safe and that it can be released, and you can have either field trials or production on that land next to you as such. So it is, we have to look at these particular aspects, and if the organized agriculture comes along and have proof that it is safe and the EPA approves those particular aspects, then we have to look at how we are going to incorporate those into the district plan, plus whatever conditions would be imposed at that point.
Wonderful, Paul. So in other words, the answer is pretty much you need a resource consent.
Correct. Or a plan change if it's prohibited.
Yeah. Now I'm going to jump around, and I think this one might be worth you jumping in on, Paul. And it's back to the earthworks topic, and just about what we've provided for in terms of mining and quarrying activities in this district plan, and what operators might need to be thinking about if they were to either extend or apply for any new mining or quarrying activities. Have you got a response to that, Paul?
Yes, we accept that when it is a large quarry and it's not a farm quarry, then probably the elements or the effects such as noise, traffic movements, vibration might be larger than a normal farm quarry would be. Case law says that in those particular cases, it can, or the effects can be externalized, with other words, outside of the property. But to do that, one has to identify those particular quarry or mining activities and then draw the lines around those particular areas that would be affected. At this point, we don't have accurate information on mining activities and large quarry activities. The quarries that presently operate all have resource consents, but their growth or their need for further growth is not yet known, and we have not identified them separately, so they are still being assessed under the earthwork rules, and we would like to know from the quarry operators if that is necessary to have a separate set of rules regarding to quarries and what the requirements would be for those aspects. The second aspect, what is also important, is that there might be minerals in the district that could be mined. Those have not yet been identified or mapped, but there might be economic viable extraction areas, and those could also be then part of the mining or extraction, mineral extraction chapter. At this point in time, it's all being dealt with under the earthwork rules.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. And I think just to reiterate with the earthwork volumes and areas, if you're wanting to find out what volume or area is proposed for your zone, do check out the earthworks chapter. We've also got the table similar to what I had on the slides before, included in the fact sheet on earthworks. So that's available on our district plan review site as well. And there's some details around farm quarries there as well. There's a question here about acoustic insulation and whether KDC are proposing any of that in the new exposure draft. And so you might recall before I mentioned that at the moment we are only proposing acoustic insulation where it's a commercial building with a residential activity in it. And that's just to manage the reverse sensitivity effects between the commercial activities that might be undertaken and those residential activities, which are sensitive activities. So at the moment, those are the only requirements we have in the Kaipara District Plan to acoustically insulate if you're in a commercial zone. There's a quick question here for you, Paul, about lighting and the measurement of lighting. Do you want to just explain again how lighting is measured, please?
It's quite a technical matter, but there is a Australian New Zealand standard that is being used, as well as the international standard where the light is being measured against those particular standards, and the limits are such that it would not be a nuisance for people around that particular lighting, and it can be controlled by flaps. It can be controlled by the strength of the lighting as such, and those are all part of the Australian New Zealand standards and the international standards, how they are being measured. While I'm on the lighting, I've got another question which also came right from the beginning when we had the discussion documents, and that deals with the night sky covenants. There were people that requested that we should look at that. We did look at that, and to qualify, or Kaipara would probably not qualify in terms of the international standards for night sky. You have to be in places like the middle of the South Island to actually qualify for those particular aspects. So at this point, we have not included night sky covenants because we would not qualify for that at this particular point in time. But it would be interesting to see how people think we can achieve that if we would like to move forward with such a proposal.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's a really good point on the dark skies sanctuaries and that point there. Megan, has there been any questions come through the chat box? Nope. Okay, so I think that probably concludes us for tonight. But certainly if anyone's got any questions, we are either available by our email address there, or certainly if you want to have a chat to us, we'll be available. So I'm just going to close this out with a closing karakia. And thank you all for attending our webinar tonight.
E karakia whakamutunga, kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea naro, ki roto ki tēnā o tātou, kia māhea te hua māki ki toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, ki hei mauri ora.